am János Horváth, born in Cece, Fejér megye, in western part of Hungary. Went to school there, then further school in Budapest. 1921, November 7th, Cece. That was a smallholder family working on the land, earning our living. It was interesting. I have endless recollections, memories, as tending the geese somewhere in the bench of the lake, or being in the church, the one who helped to ring the bell, and listening to wise men and women who had things to say. It was interesting to me. I was a curious young boy. I was curious. Even I was known and from time to time reprimanded. When will you be over with all your questions? And my mother used to send to one of the uncles that, no, I have answered enough. And so I was of that nature. If I were born in some other setting, urban or whatever, I don't know what, I suppose I would have been less enriched by those experiences. Being not as poor, but a medium income, social setting, family and child, I think I have been enriched more by that experience than if I were born in some palaces or some other settings. My father died when I was 10, 11 years old, and because of that and whatever others, I got to Budapest, arrived to Budapest to further schooling there. I became a Boy Scout in 1933. I was at the famous Boy Scout Világ Jamboree, World Jamboree in Hungary, in Gödöllő, 1933. I was that time the fresh entered candidate scout. Very soon, when I was 16 years or something like that, became involved or interested in public, the Hungarian society. It was primarily the outcome of literature, history. Oh, the everyday life of being in a commerce academy. Oh, I learned important things and interesting things. Yet the society, the nation, the community came through scouting, then the Soli Deo Gloria, the Reformed Church youth movement for young ones of the teenagers. I came into the university stage of my life, and that was full involvement with the full Hungarian everything, not just the narrowly conceived or perceived literature and history, but the current public affairs, politics, what was going on in Hungary. By 1940, I was 1942, part of the Hungarian reality, I would say politics. Because if I were not directing the politics, but I was observing it fully and had an opinion and participated in the opinion shaping and making. My representing in the kisgazda smallholder politics, that heritage of mine, yes, although I really became effective politician in my urban existence as resident of Budapest. Came whatever the war and at the end of the war, and in politics, by the time I became a member of the Parliament, I represented Budapest, the 13th district of Budapest. Not even any of the citizens' district, but the working class, the proletar district of Angyalföld. I became the Független Kisgazda party organizer and president, and then elected by that district into Parliament. So I came into politics representing the urban element of Hungary. At the same time, it meant none of the forgetting my rural, my peasant, kisgazda, smallholder. So I find myself, as I'm listening to myself, telling you that I have merged these two things in a person, myself. That heritage of Magyar, Hungarian, which came from my village and all what I have just sketched, and then getting rooted into the urban, into the city, and doing quite well here in schooling, in other things. They admitted me to the university, and I received their interesting distinctions and roles, and I got a very elegant job, work after érettségi, after the 8 years graduation. I immediately found a work, a full-time work, and parallel with that I had a full-time university experience. Now the two things were not conflicting, rather complementing. I became a better student at the university, and some of my professors recognized it because I had a workplace at the Futura, the Hungarian Agricultural Marketing Center, and the carryover of this thing. And simultaneously at this workplace, which was a kind of important in the Hungarian society, Hungarian economy, they have valued my university experience. So I was fortunate. Well, God was good to me. That very cultural and social, historical, whatever experience and heritage led to more interest in current affairs, more than would have been without those things, shall I say, cserkészet among other things. From cserkészet, Boy Scouting, how would it lead to politics? Well, looking back now, decades later, I would classify by some criteria cserkészet as a democratic, scouting is a democratic institution, and interested in many things, and brothers and sisters with whoever. We were not that class struggle, somebody I was not. I found for myself and for the society way of belonging together. and not fighting one or another gagman, but somehow how things hang together if we do it. The society can do it wrong, and it was going many wrongs, the lack of social reforms, lack of things, which literature very well expressed. And at the same time the war, Europe drifting toward the war. Now, in the context of which what I have been saying, seeing Hungary as I saw, the countries drifting toward the war was undesirable, was to bring more harm than good. There were the thing that yes, Hungary, we have problems with the world. That was this dismembered Hungary, the Trianon Hungary, and we desired, wanted resolutions for some of those inequities. Yet the solution is what? Is not the Hitler or the right-wing nationalist extreme thing, but rather, what shall I say, the Telekipál approach to the thing. For me, and for our kind of people, there was a way of desiring democratic future for Hungary. And these institutions, I am telling, and this heritage, these are democratic. Back from Széchenyi 100 years earlier up to whatever in the 1930s. So the force, the coercion, the regimentation which came from the Hitler Hitler friend foreign policy and his oppression, pressure on Hungary, made it quite clear, more and more clear, that myself, our kind of people, are compelled to participate in public life. It meant that the country is compelled, coerced, to be in the war, which was not in Hungary's interest, and the social reforms have been denied, and additional inhuman, embarrassing, shameful things happened, such as part of our fellow citizens discriminated. What we now remember is the Holocaust. So we were always very conscious of the miseries and the embarrassment and the shame, I think that's the word I am to repeat, what was happening to the Jewish Hungarians. In our speeches, publications, the publications, it was a recurrent theme. It was not recurrent, it was part of it. Substantial part of that can be recovered of what I wrote or not I wrote or somebody else wrote, but I published it, of this nature. So we used to, in those publications, what those are, the Szabad Élet Diákmozgalom, then the Szabad Ifjúság, Magyar Ifjúság Szabadságfrontja, the Ebura Fakó, különböző címeken publikáltunk. És what were the themes? Hungary's sovereignty, Hungary's loss of lives in the war, Hungary is effort of assisting a war of Hitler's, which were not to our and the discrimination against the Jews, giving into the hands of people something written about this thinking, the realization of this, to spell it out, that people knew, I knew that that's public knowledge in Hungary. Well, there was the evidence plenty, but let's keep it alive and even reinforce it. How to do it? Well, radios couldn't do it, newspapers couldn't do it, so let's do through these underground publications. The independence, during this movement, I had personally the workplace, the capability that I could take a leading, significant role in it, namely publishing, establish a publishing workshop. And there I, with my leadership, shall I say, with a number of people joining me there, printed statements, literature, whatever, of this nature. What was the message? Well, I have been telling it. And in these papers there were writing this thing and embellishing with poems. It was on December 14th when they found me. December 14th, I was sitting in my office there at that place at Nostra, as I described. And at one morning, around 10 o'clock, or after 10 o'clock, 3 persons arrived at the door telling that Horváth János urat keresik, they're looking for me. And then I can detail the details there. And they took me to the military investigation. So then, but at the place, it's a kind of routine thing. They said, well, don't move, and come to the center of the room, and tied my hands, and they said, you will come with us. I thought that I slow the process, their process, and I save persons from getting, if I keep quiet, if I do not say. Now this angered them, and comes the cruelty, the beating, and other things. The first beating is tie together and lift up and begin to beat the soul, the soul, and then that's very painful. And then other ways of cruelty, and then electrical shocks, and by the time I faint, they bring a bucket of water and come alive, and they continue, and they have questions. And when they think that I'm not capable of doing my physically, then they take back to a room, and some hours later or next day continues. So this went on the investigation. The premises were of course different. The nyilasok, the fascists had their premises that I was against the war. Later, when I got into communist captivity, their premises was to liquidate that democratic Hungary for which I was a public person. So the premises were different. So the communists were to make me useful for proving to themselves and for the world, Hungarian world, that I am an obsolete, reactionary person who is against the progress, the advancement of the society. Therefore, I'm to be removed. And advancing, obstructing the advancement, what they were telling, I got involved in conspiracy. There was an összeesküvés, a conspiracy against the advancement, progress of Hungary. And for they wanted me to say that and agree to stories they invented, fiction stories, or myself add to it, so that they could use as ammunition making their case. And for that purpose they have used cruelties. There was no government of them yet. It was a transitional stage when they wanted to make moves toward the removal of the democratic, patriotic government, which was elected. So since I was one of those, the removal of them so that they could make whatever the communist process has been in Hungary and elsewhere, in that road I was, and to be removed. So they invented a conspiracy that I was conspiring against the patriotic, true, wonderful Hungary. I was evil. And to sign statements to this effect, and to prove, to make statements that other people have been doing, so that the conventional conspiracy way the communists have been doing 100 times in different places. Regarding the interrogation, sometimes it was the same as the Nyilas and the Gestapo. Sometimes different. Sometimes the Nyilas was more cruel, sometimes the communist was more cruel, even though if the very same persons did it. Not surprised. It was kind of expected that whoever, and it was spelled out repeatedly, whoever had the vision and the courage to stand up for a cause at what situation, that person is likely to do same under other situations. I tell about what happened to us, the 12 students of the resistance movement and the captives of the Nazis. What happened to us when I wrote this 30 years later or something, and I found that out of the 12 of us, 8, maybe 9, were in communist prison also. Remove these individuals, remove me. And where to do? Well, one way is to shoot and to kill. And another way of holding in imprisonment. Another is to send away to forced labor, to make use of them. In my case, they wanted to keep me very tight, not to send to forced labor, because what if I escape? That was their mentality. And another element in their mentality is that political prisoners and political prisoner of my type was always regarded by them as a bargaining chip. The bargaining chips. Because what if, indeed, the superpowers come to an agreement? What if, indeed, the Soviet Union lives up to the Yalta Agreement, which stipulated that in Hungary there will be democracy. And for 2 years they allowed it and later they denied it. What if they come to an agreement that they hold up to it? What if it would be worth for Moscow to have an accommodation with Washington? Then the bargaining chips. In this century and back in history, always people hold bargaining chips. Sometimes it was being isolated in a prison and living with other prison mates in confinement. And not much more than being outside of the real world. Sometimes, weeks or months later, there was another mentality of the jailkeeper or the political director who they were very tight, not talking to each other, withholding communication with the world, letters or visiting relatives, or even books or something, and at some point allowing some of these people to have work, others not. Then always the thing that they will take me, this prisoner, back to further inquiry, investigation. So it was always a status of dependence, to put it mildly. And sometimes it was cruel treatment. It came some wild guards who kicked or things. The thing there was generally, if I can generalize, I think I ought to, is surviving this or not. Is there going to be an end of this thing of being thrown into somewhere and die there, or still, shall I still see the light? I mean, out the world, the street, where I move around, and so the living or the survivor, living or dying. This was the theme. There were many people at many times in prison who were to, if it were kind of bidding that we are never going to see the freedom. December, so it really at Christmas time, 1950. So by 1951, January, I was out of prison. It was, and I said, here are your papers, and go to the railroad station. And I walked to the railroad station, and I was just happened going an express train to Budapest. It was full. There's no way of getting, but people saying that somehow I smelled prison. People coming out of prison smell prison. And there the people, I smelled prison, everybody was so nice to me. Strangers, Hungarians who lived in the Stalinist Rákosi world, they were nice to me. And they made me go up, and they inside the car, and they insisted that I sit down, and do I have something? So that was the first impression, the Hungarian people. I was not an outcast, somebody. Somehow they didn't think that I am a murderer who is out of prison. I came back to Budapest, had to report the next day, and then frequently at the local police station. Then work, and after some weeks I became a deputy to deputy laborer, electric generating plant, and generator by burning coal. So, throwing coal into the furnace, it burns there and comes the electric generation on. But pulling it out and moving it away, that's an unbelievably cruel, murderous thing. So I got that job there. Because it still burns with full. It has to be moved out in order to throw it the new coal. But then what do you do with that? We put it into steel carts, and then what do you do with the steel? It's burning. What do you do with it? I have to throw the steel cart into an artificial lake into the water, so that's to neutralize that burning hell, so that throwing it, burning it, and when I turn that cart and it falls into that water, it's something like an atomic bomb blows up. It's just nature, and that all the gas and heat and everything comes on me. So I had that work for some while, and then I got advanced. I know I read literature and I hear speeches. I don't think I ever had that sense of indignation. Indignant for whom? Rákosi Mátyás, Stalin, Péter, Jóisten, or who. And that's what it is. And I hear, right now, these weeks, we are celebrations or recalling the communist cruelties and revolution. And yes, I am reporting on it, I am recalling it, and I have survived it. It's mathematically or probabilistically or stochastically or whatever scientific terms I use, it's the most unlikely that I survive. I am here, but I am not indignant for this or that. I'm not angry for who should I be angry? Of course I am angry for what happened to my friends, to my people, to this Hungarian nation, to the world. But not what happened to me. We take whatever it is. Why have I survived any of these things? So if I had died early, then I wouldn't have been subjected to the miseries of the next and subsequent stages. It was that how people and how the individuals saw themselves, the society, the country, what harm communism, Soviet colonialism did to Hungary. But this was not something that I am to be surprised about. I knew that from expectations. Well, I was a literate person. I knew history, I knew society, I knew social dynamics, I knew economics, and so on. I knew that, but more or less what I expected. It was terrible. No, I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave in 1956 either. I went as an envoy or something of the revolution, and there was no way of returning. No, there was to go and was to stay. I was very much of understanding that Nagy Ferenc and Varga Béla and Kovács Imre and whoever were, and hundreds and thousands of Hungarians in America, some of them because of saving their life or finding a living, and some of them with a mission, with political exile. And all of them I approve, and said yes. Somehow I thought that I belonged here. I should have been here because I knew that whatever should have been here. I went with this coercion, with this compulsion, whatever. 1956, November 6, 10, so the first week after the revolution's oppression, the freedom fight. The world was told that there is a counter-revolution in Hungary. They become to lie about or justify the Soviet occupation. And I said, well, that's what really irritated me. Now, that's where I was irritated, that the world began to believe that. The world press, I heard through radios, that the Hungarian, comes the Soviet army who puts the country in order, because there was a counter-revolution cruelty. That was indignation, unacceptable. So, what is to do? I went to the American embassy seeking out journalists here in Budapest. Western journalists had almost zero impact. They kept telling, and I said, well, then I go there and attempt to say it. At least I think I had some equipment. I had roles enough in the revolution so that I could say more than the mission. That I failed. Well, it didn't work out that way. It still means to me today that I had to do it. Even though that's not the public sentiment here in Hungary, never. They call me as a refugee, they tell me that I escaped, and I wouldn't mind if I did, but I didn't. And that it didn't succeed. Well, it didn't. Many things do not succeed. It doesn't mean that one ought not attempt to do it. In Hungary, this Hungary, and people about Hungary in America, and Americans about Hungary, and anybody about Hungary, would do good if came to understand some of these things. That it was not that we Hungarians did something wrong here or there. We were betrayed. But when we had the promise, the pledge to have democracy, the Yalta Agreement, we lived with that pledge. We held elections. Now the mentality in America and here that we were fools, didn't we know that the Soviets were to cheat us? Said, well, I knew that is a probability, but I knew that there was a document signed by Roosevelt, Stalin and Churchill. And the document said that there will be democracy in Hungary if the Hungarians want it. If the Hungarians want it. Well, I did. And I believed that the Hungarian people want it.